Hi everyone, welcome to Membership Voice. I'm Kero O'Shea, the coordinator of The Voice and the host for this evening's webinar. A very special welcome to tonight's presenter, Stacie Mei Laccohee-Duffield from Rotary, Ellenbrook, Western Australia. Hey Stacie Mei, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Kero?
I'm fine, thank you. It's really important at this stage to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm hosting tonight's webinar. I acknowledge the strength of their continuing culture and offer my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and wish the community all the best with current reconciliation initiatives. But now for tonight's presentation, Rotary Clubs as Safe Spaces, to be presented by Stacie Mei Laccohee-Duffield. Over to you, please, Stacie Mei.
So first, I'd like to just introduce myself. So I'm Stacie Mei. I'm from the Rotary Club of Ellenbrook in Perth, WA. I'm a woman with a transgender experience and my pronouns are she, her. So I'd like to also thank the people of the Noongar Nation, of which the land that I plant my feet. I arrived in Australia in 2013 and I've been blessed with the opportunity to become my true self while being here and also have a beautiful child who is Australian. I pay my respects to those elders past, present and emerging and recognise that this land was never ceded. So thanks everybody. So for me, the birth of my child was actually the start of my journey towards being Stacie Mei. I tried to tell my father when I was a child that I was a bit different and I felt differently and I wanted to be feminine and didn't kind of like doing boy things, you know, wasn't typical. And in his words, it was that I had to be a man, you know. And that was, you know, in the 80s, 90s period. It was a different culture back then. And so I did the best I could. And I was the best man I could and ended up being a project manager in engineering as an electrical engineer, but never really got to be my true self. So in 2019, shortly after having my child, I sort of succumbed to depression and wanted to take my own life. Luckily, that vision of having my child and the will to be present for him kept me here today. And in August 2021, I then decided to get therapy and began that transition to be full-time in February 22 of this year, which is, would never have believed possible. And I would have believed that I'm sat here tonight in front of you presenting to the Membership Voice about my story and how Rotary can help. So part of my transition process, I became actively involved in my community. So I joined both the Ellenbrook Community Garden and the Rotary Club. And as my first Rotary project, I helped restore the garden from 5 members to a full garden of 20 odd members and up and running and funded and having shade and looking beautiful, which really instilled that sense of community with me. So I decided that I wanted to be part of the solution so that other young people like me don't have to live my journey and know that there is a community there for them. And I believe Rotary, as an organisation with, I think it's something like 1.4 million neighbours, leaders, community members, has that reach to be able to influence our community to accept such a vulnerable part of society. And that's really why I'm talking to you tonight and really why I'm encouraging you to make Rotary an inclusive place. And Rotary is now committed to the new DEI as well. So, yeah, it's a really good part. So there's a picture of me, literally in my favourite dress a couple of weeks ago. And then that's the old me. The interesting bit is still female in both pictures, but it's how I express myself. And that's the bit to understand is I was always female, always had the desire to be female. Just I lived in fear and hiding my whole life. And I suffered the trauma and anxiety, and I still have to manage that of representing yourself. And I believe everyone should be able to represent who they truly are and be able to be accepted as that. So that's me. So I want to give you a bit of why. So I want to just encourage that this is a safe place for everybody. So if there's topics that get a bit difficult, please let me know, and we can sort of discuss that or pass that bit. Some of the stats can be quite confronting. So obviously Rotary is committed to the DEI, which is fantastic. When I saw that message come through as a Rotarian, and I just come out as well, I got super excited, and that's why I've jumped onto that bandwagon and say, let's start with LGBT. Right, because we're a really vulnerable community. It's about people of all backgrounds and experiencing the best life, regardless of what their age is, what their ethnicity is, what their race is, their colour, their abilities, their socioeconomic status, their sexual orientation, their identity. All that stuff shouldn't matter in our society. And it's about equity. And people sort of go, oh, why should people be treated better than others? And go, well, we already do that. Look at what Rotary has done for those vulnerable people in those African countries suffering from polio. We've invested, we've put that support in. So what I'm kind of asking you to do is to go, hey, there's another community that needs your help, and it's right on our doorstep. So I'm asking you to provide that bit of equity within your community to support them and welcome them, not just support them, but welcome them and make it clear that they're welcome. And then it creates that place of inclusion, creating experiences for everyone in our community to feel welcome, respected, and valued. And so I really love that Rotary is committed to this DEI. And then just moving into the Rotary four-way test. So we all sign up to this and we become Rotarians. We say, is it the truth? And diversity is a fact, right? It's there. 11% of our population that we know of is LGBTI plus. Right? It's there. It's in our society. It's part of our community. It's part of our clubs already. Some more than others. Is it fair that we provide equity? And equity is a choice, our choice as club members to where we put our equity, where we put our time, our energy. So that's what I'm asking you. I'm asking you to make that choice to support this community. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And this is the action we take. That action to be inclusive and bring a new set of people to our clubs, for those that don't have a diverse club, is part of that action, is part of that process. And you'll meet new people, learn from their experiences, have more knowledge about your community. And of course, the result is beneficial. And that sense of belonging for a community is obviously beneficial to them, but it's also that belonging for you to understand the wider group of the LGBT community and understand some of the issues that they face. And bring that belonging, that sense of achievement from helping the community. So I want to put some stats in front of you. So so it's got the 11% on there. So 11% of people in our community identify as LGBTI. So just in case you don't know, so you've got the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex is the I. We do expand that now to IQA, which is the queer questioning, and then the asexual. But I think Grant had covered that in the last presentation, so I'm trying not to cover ground, but you can obviously watch Grant's presentation on Membership Voice to kind of get more of a ground in this space. The scary couple of facts is 44% of those choose to hide that fact. All right. So, and that's just the ones who are telling us on the surveys, 44% of them are hiding. How many more are hiding above the 11% that put the hand up? So that's stuff to understand. And even when we go to a medical situation, still in a medical scenario where they should really be disclosing it, 34% of them are still hiding. They don't tell the GPs or the doctors, And then the really big stat that and the reason why I'm part of youth mental health at the moment, doing some work there, and the big part of that is 71% of those people, myself included, don't reach out to crisis support when they need it. I chose to almost take my life. Thankfully, my son saved me, but I didn't reach out to crisis support in that journey. I suffered alone. I didn't reach out because I thought I was the only person like me. And then there's two stats that affect our young people, and I really, there's a lot of focus on our young people at the moment. Is an LGBTI person is 5 times more likely to commit suicide or attempt suicide. than the sort of a cisgender binary individual. And a transgender person, so somebody like myself, is 11 times more likely, which is really scary. I think the stats are around young people between the ages of 16 and 17. Over 50% of those have either seriously considered suicide or they have actually attempted it. So my heart bleeds for those who haven't made it. I'm a lucky one, and I always consider myself lucky in this process. But yeah, like, you just have to remember how vulnerable this community is and the shame and the prejudice that's occurred in our history that still carries forward with that fear. And then as I try to bring it a bit more positive, so by flying the flag, by announcing that you are friendly and you support this community, 81% of our community say they will trust that and they will get involved. So it's a really big shift from hiding to going, oh, this is safe and I know it's safe, so I'm more than happy to engage in that service, and be a part of that. And so I want to lead that into intersectionality. So intersectionality is a little bit a new term, I think, that's coming around. But it's basically just saying that in general, minorities of all types experience varying forms of discrimination, and those forms of discrimination might not be exclusive to one thing. So, you can be disabled in LGBT, you can have a mental illness and be physically disabled. And it's kind of showing that it's actually, you're not just supporting LGBTQI in its bubble. Actually, there's a whole range of intersectionality around that, like in terms of race, fertility, gender, personality, culture, physical health, religion, education, social status, class, so it's remembering that there is this intersectionality. And I think in the future, we're probably going to talk more about that, because a lot of funding programs and support tend to focus on one piece. So there'll be funding for disabilities, there'll be funding for LGBTI, there'll be funding for like even LGBTI youth. Like, it gets very specific in how fundings and grants and support are given, whereas actually we need to consider all of those intersectionalities to be able to provide the support that people need. And also recognizing that we have intersectionality within Rotary. Some of our clubs are very traditional and they have their master sergeants. They have a history within there, and they also have like some are more religious in some different countries, maybe sort of Christian faith-based or Muslim faith-based, depending on which country you come from. So actually recognizing that we do have those beliefs, but what we don't do is we don't cause prejudice within Rotary because of those beliefs. It's okay to have somebody LGBT and somebody religious in the same room. And it's about the way we interact with each other and the way we support each other to be an inclusive club. And this leads me into this belief versus identity. So the biggest thing that I hear a lot at the moment, particularly with the politicians around the election that just came up in Australia, is they're really leveraging on that faith versus identity, belief versus identity. So just an example there, this is the Ascension Church Midland. The priest there wears a sash every sermon to show his support for the LGBT community. And in obviously 2013, the Diocese of Perth actually voted for same-sex relationships. There isn't a huge divide between religion and the LGBTI community. It's just what the media and some of the extreme views that are getting put into that media. As Anna Hagen is a Christian social worker in the US, and she still says, she views each client as unique and a child of God with different gifts and strengths, and all of them are worthy of dignity and respect. It's a really powerful message coming from the religious community, because diversity, equity, and inclusion is a choice that we make. Faith is the choice that we make. Often it comes through our families and our heritage, but identity is not. It's who we are and who we develop from young. So we shouldn't be segregating each other because of how we identify. So how do we do that as Rotarians? So that's the why. So obviously I joined the Rotary LGBT board this year, and they are an amazing bunch and have done some great work, and I'm glad that I can use that resource now to share with you. So what I'd like to take you through is Rotary LGBT Fellowship have created an inclusion tool. So they've already thought about the process. They've already come up with a way to go through a checklist to help you make your clubs LGBTI inclusive. So I'm going to talk you through that tool. So you can go to the website and you can download it. I think I'm going to ask Kiro at the end to share it with everyone who attended anyway, so that you've got it, but it's on the, you can catch it on the website too. So essentially, the first step is to really look at the club experience. What does that look like in terms of what knowledge is in the clubs and how you move forward? So you're reviewing, what can my club do to be more inclusive? So reviewing the club forms, for example, ensuring that we're not using that gender identifying things like, chairman, using chairperson, or ladies and gentlemen, and saying things like friends and family or folks, or just taking some of the gender side out, because there are what we call non-binary folk in our community who don't identify as male or female. So that allows them to feel included. And I know it's hard, like we all get it wrong, but it's just owning that and trying to be more inclusive in our language. And our application forms too, so saying, allowing an option for somebody to tick other, or, so reviewing those documentations and communication, ensure the club meets at venues with a neutral bathroom. If they rock up to come to your event as a non-binary person and they don't have a toilet to go to, you force them to make a decision and a choice. It isn't very welcoming. So consider the venues that you're using if you want to attract a wider community. And then engage with guest speakers, get that education, get that experience. You can then get LGBT speakers to come on board, find out what community you do have locally. In our sort of guide, there are links there where you can go and find more information about, gender language, some articles, things about transgender equality, QA, bathroom access and why that's important. For me, I still don't go to the gym because I'd have to go to the toilet, and most often when you go to the disabled toilet in a gym, it's a cleaning cupboard, right? Because, it doesn't feel safe. And I'm not at a point where I'm comfortable to get changed, like physically changed in the female bathroom, because I still have my own fear. So there's challenges and barriers that especially transgender people face that you just need to kind of help them through and make, and come to that journey. So once you've done the club experience, stand back, right, what do we do with our members? How do we educate and make our members more inclusive? So providing that face-to-face and online training. So we're giving you a list of resources there. There's a load of stuff on our page. And let them have that awareness. Provide some bystander awareness. So what can quite often happen in the community is somebody says something wrong, but nobody picks it. They just let it slide. Oh, that's okay. He didn't mean anything by it, or they didn't mean anything by it. So no, you have to stop being the bystander and address behaviour which is not inclusive or reflects, bias, even unconscious ones. Like saying, guys, hey guys. Well, you've got probably half of the room of females for a start, and then not to mention our non-binary and our transgender folk. But just be aware of those unconscious words that we use. When I speak to local LGBT organisations, and they can help you through that journey. And then promote and make resources available for how members can learn more about the language, be inclusive, understand what pronouns are, and how to use them. What do they mean? And then look at how we can remainers an individual support for individuals, because not everyone's going to get it right out the gate, and that's okay. I know there's a couple of members in my club in Ellenbrook that for the first few weeks of me coming out didn't talk to me, not because they didn't support me because they didn't know the words to say or what to ask, what they could ask or couldn't ask. And that's why this journey, your club should be a safe place for both sides, safe place for people coming in as LGBT, but also for your existing club members to ask those wrong questions, to be able to go, what do I say when I don't know if that person's gender is, because that's actually a fear that our existing members will have. And it's okay. Just politely ask that person, I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what your gender is. May I know your pronouns? Mine are she, her. What are your pronouns? Give them the chance to find out all those practical steps for how they start to engage and what are the right words to say. What are the ways to apologize? Like most of the time, somebody gets it wrong. They make a big, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm trying to. It's like, it's not about you. It's about the individual. So just go, oh, I'm really sorry, and use their name or the pronouns. Short, sweet. And then once you've got your members sort of getting the grasp of the terminology, how to be inclusive, you're providing an inclusive facility to have your meetings, and we talk about service. Rotary is about service before self and about service to the community. So actively celebrate and promote and participate in LGBT events. So for Perth, November is Pride Month. It's a very important month. I know most of the world celebrate in June. But we have Idaho, so the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Intersex and Transphobia. We have obviously our Pride March. Tomorrow is actually International Pronouns Day. So great opportunity to wear a Pride badge. I've got a pronoun badge. I've got mine on ready for tomorrow for North Metro Health Service. And then actively support the LGBT charities and organisations around you. Quite often they're underfunded and undersupported. They face challenges around, quite often the LGBT community has a lot of mental health issues that require very specific support. It's very difficult to raise money for that. It can be quite expensive, like a psychiatrist can be $250,000 a year, So these programs are very small and help very few people. There's actively supporting those organisations, actively involved. Ensure that you've got a senior leader within your club that can be a role model and demonstrates that support by inclusion. Call out the master sergeant when he's out of step. Attend some events, invite people to come to the club. We're actually part of Pride March this year, so I'll talk to you about that. And then it's image. So we got there. We've done the club experience. We've got our members. We're starting to get involved in local communities. So then we go, right, how's our image? And I've said before that it takes reaching out a little bit to the LGBT community because they hide. They're hiding, they're staying safe. So by displaying the Rotary branding, participating in LGBT events and putting that logo on there, we've got a fellowship logo with the rainbow on it. You've got like the flag behind me, which is the Pride Progressive flag. They now get one with an intersex symbol, a little circle in the white there. So displaying those flags, saying, yes, we are inclusive, we do accept LGBT people. Update the club's website, indicate your support, have that on your website. Promote your involvement in those initiatives that you're starting to get involved in. Put them on your social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn. I know Matthew Pham talked beautifully about using Instagram, but using those tools to kind of advertise and promote that, hey, come and see us, come and talk to us, you're safe here. And then we can go into the nitty-gritty of, we're getting there now, we're working out in the community, we're advertising that fact, and then we get down to business operation. And this is part of the DEI, which is coming through. Anyway, it's getting those grievances policies in place, reviewing those policies to make sure that we have that bullying, harassment, and discrimination in there, that we're not going to tolerate anymore. There's no more. Review your strategic documents, ensure that you're embedding them in your club's goals, like your fundraising strategies and your activities. Ensure that the club uses those friendly businesses in the community. So if you're going to get advertising or you're going to pay for services out in the community, ask them, are you inclusive? That's the way we change the world. We use our influence and our connections to promote, good well-being and good activities and those morals. So we want to be inclusive, we want to deal with those and get those Rotary's core values in place in the companies and the community that we engage with. So that's sort of the toolkit. You sort of follow that step by step, work through them one at a time. I have to stop that before we go to that. So I'm happy for my local clubs, obviously, to visit face-to-face and come to see them in Perth, but also for any clubs that are not in Perth, I'm more than willing to present this again to your members or something similar around that you feel is supportive for your members that we wish to hear, because I'm really keen for Rotary across the globe to be a safe place for the LGBT community. And I believe we have the connections, we have the 1.4 million members to already part of workplaces, part of families, part of communities, to really make a change, make a difference. And that's what Rotary is about. So obviously I mentioned that tomorrow is International Pronouns Day, so I'm going to let a video play.
I go by she, her, and hers pronouns. That's just how it's been for me.
My pronoun is he, and I present as a he. Some trans people might look like me and present as a she.
Recently, I've come across they, and I like they. So you can refer to me either as she or they.
I like to be referred to as many things. It's really about what sort of feels good to our ears when we hear it.
Pronouns are important because they indicate a degree of respect. Who doesn't want to be respected?
For a long time, a lot of people have felt like that they don't fit into the mold of primarily he or primarily she, or maybe they feel they're a blend of both and that there's not really a word for that.
I found out about gender non-specific pronouns ze and here, and I thought that was funny. That makes people trip up, because really technically I'm not a she. I'm not a he either.
There are some situations where we really put way too much stock into whether or not somebody is a man or a woman. There's a lot of situations that we just don't need to necessarily have gendered language. If you're unsure about somebody's pronoun, pull them aside and ask, hey, what are your pronouns?
It's not even preferred pronoun because it is their pronoun.
So some people go by he, some people go by she, some people actually use the pronoun they.
You can avoid mistakes by just saying them, theirs, they.
Their gender is still valid regardless of whether or not you understand it.
Misgendering a person by using an incorrect pronoun is an act of disrespect.
Everybody else in the world out there can say, I am, and they identify themselves, and everybody believes them. But when I say I am, I don't know why people just don't believe us.
So obviously tomorrow is International Pronouns Day, so I encourage you to share your pronouns. Whenever you meet somebody or say anyone, just say, hi, my name is Stacie Mei, and my pronouns are she, her. So use that to encourage others to come forth with their pronouns. Tomorrow, we've also got the Pride coming up. So in WA, we're doing the Pride March. So we're encouraging people to sign up and join us for a long walk down in Northbridge and really represent Rotary in being an inclusive place and marching with pride. The truth is that equity is fair and builds goodwill and better friendships and is beneficial to everybody. So that's my presentation piece. Thanks, everybody. And I invite you to ask some nice questions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Stacie Mei. Question about this process, and I'm going to start on the flip side here, Stacie Mei. Looking at this and appreciating that we have, I think we've got a bunch of Rotary clubs who would like to be able to make this work. What do you see as the biggest mistake coming out the other way? What do you see as the biggest mistake or the most likely mistakes that Rotary clubs are likely to make as they move to address the kinds of things you've been talking about in the inclusion toolkit?
I think the first big mistake is to assume that the LGBTI community is looking for you. You know, thinking that just because I'm going to become inclusive doesn't mean that we're going to automatically welcome the community. There's a huge fear and a lot of tick boxing, I guess is the word, across the globe around inclusivity. So you really need to engage. And that's why in the toolkit, we talk a lot about finding those community partners that are already have that trust and respect in the community and being present for that. I think we think that, yeah, we'll change our policies, we'll tick the boxes, we'll advertise that we've ticked all these boxes, that we're going to get a big flood of the community. And actually, you know, that's not realistic. What you actually need to do is actually engage. You actually need to go out, be a part of the community. And that's why it's an important step in the process.
So I guess the issue there is that it's about moving through, if you like, tolerance, acceptance, and actually going out and creating opportunities to work with the community.
Yeah. And that's part of our mission anyway, you know, as Rotarians, and part of our community is to engage the community. So what we're talking about is actually 11% of our community is LGBT. So let's put at least 11% of our time into engaging that community. But I'm asking you to be equitable and maybe even engage in more than that, because that's how you get goodwill. And that's how you encourage people to join us.
Now, one of the things that, and we touched on this earlier on, and I've presented on a membership voice previously, is one of the challenges facing Rotary clubs, and it's a difference between very successful Rotary clubs and ones that want to be, is being relevant to a community. Now, you touched on that horrific suicide rate, particularly amongst young members of the LGBTIQ plus community. How do you see? I mean, obviously, that's a space in which, you know, because we're dealing with suicide and all that sort of thing. Where do you see the entry points for Rotary clubs that want to do something about reducing that suicide rate? Obviously, it's not an easy thing. Otherwise someone would have done it by now.
Yes, and this is, I talk a lot about this in the health space. So we have a health system that supports the very, very vulnerable that are in crisis. What our health system doesn't support is that peer level support. And I know they're starting to get on board with this, but they're not active in that vulnerable stage before we get to crisis. And I think as Rotarians already involved in our community, we have that opportunity to reach out and provide safe places for those that haven't quite got there yet in terms of crisis. And that's where I really would love, you know, Rotarians, as I say, are leaders, they are community members, they are part of business, they're part of society, you know, and if we start putting that social side out there, we might encourage that person, like myself, rather than thinking they're alone, to go, oh, hang on a minute, what if I go talk to that person? There's a transgender lady that is in Ellenbrook Rotary Club. Maybe I'll go see if I can bump into her and ask those questions I don't know who else to ask, you know? There's, you know, a lesbian female that's running a business down the road that's part of a Rotary community activity, you know? By being active and being open, we actually can engage at that peer level environment rather than waiting for somebody to get to crisis. And yes, we should support these crisis things, but we should also support those community groups, provide community activities that specifically include LGBT people before they get to being vulnerable. One of the scary facts, I think it was about 340 people in Black LGBT women have been murdered in America this year. And most of those are by their own families.
Really?
Yeah. So it's people they know and family members. So it's actually quite often what we find is actually it's in their own home. A lot of our young people in the health service are transient because of this, you know, because they're not safe at home. So if they're not safe at home, where do they go? So we've got to be able to provide community spaces for them.
Gee. Food for thought. But now, while we're thinking about that one, Wayne Dawkins has a question. Over to you, please, Wayne.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Hi,
sure
Wayne.
can.
Yeah. Hi. Stacie, I attended a Legal Aid WA seminar probably a couple of months ago where they had lawyers in the family law area come in and they had a speaker talking about what you've just been talking about, basically. But he spent a long time on the pronoun thing, and I've got to admit that at the end of the session, I was probably as confused, if not more confused, than I was at the start. And then I started seeing people's on their emails, at the bottom of the emails, it starts popping up with she, her, and I'm going, why are you doing that? I know who you are. So my question was, how do people who are older and thick, how do they get hold of it? How do they get to understand this? And is there something in the toolbox that helps that? Because seriously, that was a 3-hour session that was full on. And really at the end of it, I walked out and I thought, I'm no better off than I was 3 hours ago. So
there is a specific section in the toolbox that talks about pronouns, and there's a link that kind of explains what those pronouns mean. But the fundamental thing is, I think it shedded in the video there where I'm she, her. Why don't you believe me? We take a lot of stock in what sex we are, when actually we don't need to. I'm still me. I'm still an advocate. I'm still a Rotarian. I'm still an engineer. I'm still a project manager. I'm still a mother, parent of a beautiful 6-year-old child. The thing is, it's about expression. I want to express to the world that I'm female. And sometimes I do, I have male features and I walk into a room and somebody will call me him or sir. And so what we're trying to do is encourage people to recognize that there's not a binary. We're no longer just male and female. We may not be how we look. For me, I'm a woman with a transgender experience, so I was male.
Stacie, you said in your presentation somewhere back at the start of it, there was a comment about lack of understanding. And what was in my head was, does the pronoun thing, is that before the understanding, or is there the understanding before getting onto the pronoun? What comes first, especially when you're looking at, as you know, Rotary clubs are generally male, me or older, and pretty much set in our ways, not necessarily being prejudiced, but not really understanding what's going on. What comes first? Do we start looking at the pronoun thing, or do we do something a bit stronger on understanding what it's all about? Or LGBTQ, sorry, I can't get all the letters yet.
Yeah, LGBTIQA.
IQA,
yeah.
Plus.
It is, so you do need to develop understanding, but pronouns is a step to just accepting, that why we encourage the pronouns is technically the easy bits, not to, put too much pressure on, but, we're just asking you to accept that this is happening. The world is changing. It's more diverse than it appears. We're no longer just what we're assigned at birth. We have an identity behind us. So it's respecting somebody's identity is the first step to then being able to remove those barriers. And it's, understanding, there's a whole generation of history that we've lived through that is going to be hard to undo, right? And we're not expecting everyone to go, I get it, right? But what we're asking everyone to do is accept. So by doing the pronouns is the first step of saying, I accept that there is a difference here.
Thanks, Stacie, mate. And thanks, Wayne. Stacie, we've talked mainly about Rotary clubs, but I'm thinking about something else that I have a bit to do with within our Rotary district, and that's Rotary youth programs. Well, almost all of which have a residential component, and obviously for those that involve under 18s, there's a duty of child protection elements involved.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do, say, specifically looking at those things like Rotary Youth Leadership Awards, say program of enrichment and the like, say week-long camps, weekend camp. How can we, because I know as the applications officer for our district's RILARC program, that we have had folk who, and our application process caters for the choice of pronouns and the like. But obviously that's an important acceptance issue, but there are other safety issues to do with people being in residential situations and the like. How can we address that? How can we progress that to make that program safer and more acceptable, more attractive for the community?
And that's a really good topic, because globally the world is at different places on their journey of acceptance. There are some countries where I cannot go. I've got a couple of friends that I know who are from that Arab Muslim environment. They can't tell their parents. And I think even one of my friends, they don't even have the words in their language to describe their identity. So there's no physical way for her to tell her mother that she's a lesbian. But even then, if she was able to do that, because her mother only speaks the native tongue, her mother is so heavily reliant on her religious community that it would compromise her mother's relationship with her community. So you wouldn't do that. So understanding that if we potentially reach out to those communities for our young people, their homes might not be a safe place, and then you're inviting them here. We also need to make sure that the home they're going to is a safe place. So not only ask the young person their pronouns, we need to be asking the family that they're going to spend time with if they're inclusive and safe. But we have to ask the right questions for that, So it's asking the young person what their needs are and requirements, and then making sure the family can deliver those and lining those up. And like for me, I was recently on a leadership conference on the weekend, and they were like, "Oh, some people are going to have to share rooms," and I was like, "There's no way I'm comfortable yet sharing a room because of where I'm at on my journey." And it's understanding where the young person is on their journey, and we have to be careful about how we manage that, because if we're welcoming them over and enable them to live their true self, how does that impact them returning to the home country? So you need to have a management plan around that, because they may come here, want to represent their true selves, but then have to go back to living in the closet. And that's a journey that we have to take care of.
So this would be particularly applicable to, say, Rotary Youth Exchange or the short-term exchange program.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stacie Mei. A question here from District Governor-elect Willicke, I think is, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, wants me to put the question for him. What can I focus on in my upcoming year as DG to put diversity, equity and inclusion on the agenda? Very broad question.
Yes. It's a tough question. It really depends on, I think the first step is knowing where your district is at, because that really sets the scene for how you're going to progress. I think in WA, we've got some clubs that are just proactive and all going for it. We've got a few clubs that go, hey, I want to be inclusive, but I don't really know how. And then we've got some clubs that just, there's some particular words that have been used, but they're not there and they're not ready to be there. They have no knowledge, no desire, no commitment to that. I don't think it's right that we leave those clubs alone, but maybe the energy initially is better spent on the supportive clubs to develop those tools, get that knowledge, and then use that passion and that drive to go to the second layer of clubs which want to, but aren't quite there, and use that mentoring, mentor our own clubs. And then the others will be the ones left out. And then we can go, hey, if you want to be part of the party, you've got to join in, So you can kind of develop, but I think knowing where your district is at is the first step, and then you can go through the tools and the steps to your district and really work through DEI.
So essentially, it's a matter of focusing on those who already believe or who want to believe,
Yep.
and working on momentum. You know. Yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stacie Mei. A question that you mentioned the LGBT fellowship, and I had an interesting conversation with Grant about that, where I suggested it should be an action group, and explained in very clear terms why that was a bad idea in terms of the positioning of Rotary around the globe, and I understand that now. But it is a resource. And it is a kind of a quasi-action group. How can those in the audience who want, and obviously in the asynchronous audience as well, how can they utilise the fellowship to assist in their, I mean, obviously you've got things like the inclusion toolkit. How else could you utilise the resources of the fellowship to help in this journey to better inclusion?
Also, the main tool in terms of inclusivity is the toolkit, but there's also a number of video links, podcasts, information on there that you can use to, run a video, like a 5-10 minute video in your club, make it part of an agenda item for you to go through. Invite our members. The fellowship is global. We have members all over the world. So put a request in the membership to come and talk at your club. I'm more than happy and always will be. And most of our board members are really passionate about this and more than willing to talk to people and present and offer solutions. We recently got a request from Youth Exchange to review some documents, which we did a little mini workshop and reviewed and fed back to the exchange for how they can change some of the wording and the procedures and the policies for that. So there's things that we can help and support you with, and we can try and connect you with members that are local to you as well.
One of the things that I would like to address directly, because you've covered this in part, but I think it's one of the most important things that Rotary clubs have to do sort of immediately after being relevant to their community. And that is that Rotary clubs, when they were first born, were organisations to which members had to kind of conform to be part of, which was fine. That was regimentation of the time. These days, and our Rotary International Director, Jesse Harmer's made it crystal clear that a successful Rotary club in 2022 has to be member-centric, has to be able to include people as who they are and the like. And personal safety is obviously a key issue. But there are conversations to be had there. And I suppose in terms of that journey to member centricity for members of the community, how can a club do that? Because most are still trying to convert to being member-centric. What suggestions would you make in that regard?
Gosh, that's a big question. Do you know your members? That's the first question. Who do you have in your membership? What do they do? What is their identity? Do they feel comfortable expressing that? What sort of environment do you have at your club? These are really looking in on yourself, I guess. It's the age-old question, isn't it, I guess, of, what everyone's journey, and everyone's journey is going to be unique. Some members are going to be like a couple in my club that are traditional, hold the traditional values of Rotary. We still ring the bell and, say the words, and some of the younger community don't understand or have that same background. So it's kind of where are each of your club members at? What do they need on their journey to get to where you need them to be? And that's probably the first step.
Super. Thanks, Stacie Mei. Wayne Dawkins has a great question here about interact clubs. Over to you, please, Wayne.
Stacie, I was just wondering, because talking about youth previously, if is the whole LGBTQ plus conversation, is that something that can be or stroke should be addressed with in interact clubs or the high schools that they're part of? And does the Rotary Club, the sponsoring Rotary Club, is that their responsibility to find out where the school sits on that?
I don't know if I can answer that really. I think Rotary is trying to be, it's like a not political organisation, right? And a lot of schools have their own beliefs and structures. So we have to be very careful interfering with that process. I don't think that's our battle to face. I think there's a lot of legal stuff happening around LGBTIQA plus rights. And I think that's probably best left to the lawmakers and the policymakers. But at the same token, a decision has to be made that if you're operating at a school that isn't inclusive, whether that fits in with the values and morals of your club.
Yeah.
And that's a hard question. It's a really hard question. But I don't believe it's our mission as Rotarians to change that.
No.
It's just to share the love that we have for the community. So it's a tough one to answer because I think that's a decision you have to make.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Stacie.
Thanks, Wayne, and thanks, Stacie Mei. But yes, there is a question that I do like to ask at this stage, Stacie Mei, and that is, Stacie Mei, why are you in Rotary?
I think I briefly touched it before, but during my, I guess, worst part of my depression, I really felt like I needed to keep myself busy, and I needed to be a part of the community and have people around me. Obviously, being a working parent, very busy. My focus had been on raising a family, getting a house, and I kind of was losing touch with the world and kind of dealing with my own issues, not trying to work out where I fit. You know, I was having these independent battles, so I got involved in a few community projects. Firstly, to keep myself busy, but also I have this desire to help people, and I kind of had this belief of helping others would help me, you know, and I've always kind of, you know, just work hard. So I applied that to community, and I diverted more of my attention from work. In fact, even retiring from work, I left my job as an engineer. And took a year at Gap. I did beekeeping, I did the community garden, got involved in the Rotary projects, got involved in the Ellenbrook Rotary Club, and really developed that passion for community and going, actually, you know, you're not alone, ultimately. And I needed that social support as well. And that gave me that freedom to get out of the day-to-day cycle and see what was actually going on in my community. And that's where it's led it to me today to go, actually, my community, the LGBT community is actually pretty vulnerable, and they're not represented equitably. So that's why I'm involved, and I'm really keen. And Rotary helped me through my journey by being supportive and inclusive. So I think if we can multiply that by all of our clubs in the world, and even if one person joins the club from my community, that'll be a huge step forward.
Fantastic. You know, I learn a bit every time I ask that question. I learn a little bit. Sure. If you could please join me in giving Stacie Mei a round of applause for a job well done.
Well done.
Thank you, Stacie Mei.
Well done, Stacie.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to just talk to everybody.
Now,
Don't invite me.
Yeah. On that note, thank you for being with us, everyone, and good night, and thank you again, Stacie Mei.